Okay, so just state your full name and how to spell your first and last name, and then explain a little bit about like what your position is and who you're representing and all that stuff.
Okay. My name is Patrick Brown, Patrick, last name Brown, Brown. And I'm from A Plus English Language School, and I'm an administrator there. And we work with adult learners who are learning English as a second language. Many of them are refugees, new immigrants to the United States, and many of them are low income. And so we provide instructional services for them to learn English so that they can be better prepared for post-secondary education and to enter the career field and to find a job or find employment.
Okay.
And Patrick, can you talk about how you've worked with Michigan's children and what the importance of that partnership was about?
Mm-hmm. We work with Michigan's children, and we've worked with them over the year in several different ways. We collect data from them, and they are a good resource for when we are going to speak with legislative members, or if we're going to network or go nationally. Recently, I went to a national conference and shared some of the data regarding Michigan and family literacy with different partner agencies. But also, I've attended Family Speak, which is one of Michigan's children's signature events, and that provided us the opportunity to share and give a platform to talk with legislature members and community organizers about the significance of family literacy and multi-generational education. We know that when a child has educational foundation, both at school and at home, they're better prepared for the future and more successful. And so working with Michigan's children, we have been able to kind of craft family literacy events and more specifically, be able to provide parents, especially those that are new immigrants to the United States, with the skills to be more well-rounded and to help their children be successful in their education.
Could you talk a little, kind of breaking down what you talked about, Patrick, could you talk a little more about how you use the information that we collaborated with you about in your visits to DC? Just who was the audience, how was that information shared? Just a little more about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, a little more about the Family Speak event. I loved how you described the importance of a two-generation strategy, but if you could just sort of highlight that a little more. So first about the use of the material in
Mm-hmm.
DC, and then secondly about Family Speak.
Well, Michigan's Children gives a platform and is a voice for advocacy, not only for family literacy, but adult education and children's education. We specifically have used some of the data that Michigan's Children and the Michigan League for Public Policy have put forth to when we are communicating and speaking with legislators and community organizers in our area, to provide them with specific details on the populations that live in their constituency. And we provide them with the number of students that are low income or students that are disenfranchised or a part of a minority. And so specifically to our program, Michigan's Children has given us information that roughly 70% of our adult students that we work with are parents of school age or preschool age children. And so that has kind of given us a clearer picture on some of the barriers that our students are facing when they have children and they're not able to attend school, but also ways in which they can help their children be more successful within their own education. What was the second part?
And then secondly, talking about the Family Speak that you
Right.
attended, and you brought students with you. How
Mm-hmm.
impactful was it to talk about some of the students that you brought, and how impactful it was for A, them to tell their stories, and B, for these policymakers to hear their stories?
Mm-hmm. So we attended the Michigan Children's Family Speak event at the Capitol building earlier this year, and we brought several of our students. And one of our students, her name is Sagal, and she has 7 children, and she is a new immigrant to the United States. And when we asked her to come and to speak in front of a room full of strangers and legislators, she was very nervous. But after she kind of thought a little bit further about it, she came to us and said that she'd be more than willing to do it because she wanted to show her children how important education is. And so she spoke, and many of the other students spoke about the importance of education and how having their educational goals met has influenced their children, and they know the skills in order to be able to help their children. They can encourage their children to continue and to set goals and to be organized and have a structure and a routine and have their own educational goals that they can strive to reach. Sagal and her 7 children, Sagal has attended our program for the last 3 years. Since she has come to the United States, but her 7 children have also come to our school and visited, and we videotaped her at the Family Speak event, and we shared that with her children, and it was kind of a joyous occasion for them to see her get up and speak, not in her native language, but in English to a group full of strangers, and kind of gave them a joyous cause for celebration, and to see their mother having such success in her own educational endeavors. It was it was very overwhelming to witness that and see her children and look at the way that they admire her for kind of overcoming her fears and being able to do that, which is why she chose to do that, so that she could show and highlight how important her children are. And Michigan's Children gave us that opportunity to do that, and gave Sagal and all the other students that shared their individual stories the opportunity to do that. And the Michigan Speak event also gave an opportunity for legislators and community organizers to hear directly from their constituents of the programming that Michigan's Children has been a part of and how it has impacted their lives in a very positive and meaningful way. The programming that they do for family literacy and the programming that their partners do has been very beneficial, and sometimes it's hard to connect that and to see that lived out fully. And I think events like the Family Speak event give many voices to those that aren't often heard. And so they have an opportunity to share some of their successes and to share how programming like Michigan's Children has been impactful not only in their life, but in the lives of their children.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
That was very nice.
Good.
Yeah.
I think it's true. I mean, I really think that...
I like the smile.
Oh, thanks.
The smile. Summarize what you were... Any final thoughts?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. It's
Yeah.
Well, the work that Michigan's Children does... Let's start over.
so take it.
Yeah. Well, the work that Michigan's Children does is so important, not only to my program and to other adult education providers, but also just to family literacy in general. We know that having generational education is so important, not only for the future of our country, but also just for our society and our morals and our values. And investing in education is a great return on investment at many levels. When you have people that are engaged and involved in their communities and involved in the economy, it's a very positive thing. And then their children are going to follow in that footstep, and their children are going to be involved in our society. And it just brings a greater awareness of the importance of education. And Michigan's Children has really been at the forefront of that.
Very nice.
Beautiful. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, no problem.
Parent with 7 children, and why it was so important for her to tell her story, ending with the kicker, and you know, the nice positive thing that's just happened is she's just gotten her citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be okay?
That'd be fine.
Okay.
And we're rolling if you want to start.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So Segal actually last week received her citizenship, and it was a very joyous occasion. So seeing the growth that she has had as an individual from coming and going to the Family Speak event and being very timid and very scared and afraid to coming into our office with her American flag and waving it around because she's a new American citizen was overwhelming experience, not only for our staff, but also for her family and for her children. All of her children attended the event, where her swearing in and her citizenship ceremony. And she sent us many pictures, and I received those via email, and it was just a very joyous occasion for her to have that success. And that's a success story that is echoed, not only throughout our program, but many of the programs that Michigan's Children works with.
So anyway,
Okay, we can begin whenever you guys are ready. But first, can you spell your first and last name and who you represent in your position, or what your position was?
oh, well, I will spell
Okay.
my whole name. My name is Sharon Claytor Peters, and that's S-H-A-R-O-N, and middle name Claytor, capital C-L-A-Y-T-O-R, and then last name Peters, no hyphen, capital P-E-T-E-R-S. I now operate my own consultant firm, which is called Claytor Peters Consulting. I have done consulting in children's issues, but I am the former director, or the former president and CEO of Michigan's Children.
Okay.
Could you talk about your time as president and CEO, some of the signature programs that came under development during your tenure with Michigan's Children as
Sure.
administration?
I'd be glad to. I began as president and CEO of Michigan's Children 20 years ago in the spring of 1996. At that time, I was the second president of Michigan's Children. It had been in existence for 3 years, but those first 3 years were pretty rocky, and the leadership of the organization was up and down. It came and went, and there wasn't consistent, strong leadership. And anybody knows that in building an organization, you need to be full-time on the job and consistent. So it was really came to me to the era that I was president, and I was there for more than 12 years. That was the period of really building the organization, building its reputation, getting people to even understand what child advocacy was about. I had had a career in government relations. I had worked as a legislative staffer and then as an assistant secretary of state to Richard Austin. But I had also worked as a lobbyist and in all ranges of government relations. So I had a vast understanding of the policymaking process and of the players, and that's very important in understanding who could influence policy for children. I also had been elected to and was serving on the Lansing Board of Education at the time that I became president and CEO of Michigan's Children. I had a vast understanding of educational issues. It was a lot of work. It's a challenge, probably the biggest challenge. I consider it to be the linchpin of my life's work, the ability to direct and build Michigan's Children. And it was an honor to have the position. I'm glad to see the organization growing now. And I will talk about some of the signature programs. One of the policy programs that I'm proudest is still in existence at Michigan's Children was the KidSpeak program. And out of KidSpeak has grown a Family Speak and other methods of allowing people to address public opinion makers directly. So in KidSpeak, we would convene, we would pretty much replicate what a legislative hearing was like for any legislative committee. But we would bring together the policymakers, legislators, as well as executive branch department directors and other opinion leaders who were making and implementing policies that affected children. We would bring them together to be what we called a listening panel, basically to function as a legislative committee does, to listen to and question young people who would come and speak. So Kids Speaks usually were focusing on youth, on kids that were perhaps in secondary school. We had occasionally got very precocious elementary school kids, upper elementary school kids, and often focused on middle school kids to come in and speak about various issues. And we found that they can really express themselves very, very well, and it was very impactful. Legislators would always come back and tell us that they really appreciated those opportunities and that they were very meaningful. So Kids Speak was born in 1996, the same year I went to Michigan's Children. That was a signature program that I'm very proud of. We also began a lot of policy programs, the Budget Watch series, the Budget Watch project, which is a way to interpret. We recognize that how government allocates money, how money is spent, is the strongest demonstration of real priorities. Everybody can say they're all for children, but if you don't invest in children, if you don't put the money behind the programs that children need, then what do you have? So Michigan's Children got a very strong work in the area of monitoring budgets, of seeing where money was really being spent, and that's work that is still ongoing. We also, another program that we started, Michigan's Children has to sustain itself. That's one of the more difficult aspects of child advocacy, because our constituency, children, cannot fund the organization themselves. So we began a program called Heroes Night. We began an event, a signature event, which helped to raise the profile of the organization and also helped to raise funds. And we enlisted the corporate community and the foundation community and individuals to come together and support the efforts that Michigan's Children was putting forth in terms of improving public policy for children. So programs that keep the organization going are equally important to the kind of programs that heighten policy issues.
Sharon, would you mind addressing the work that Michigan's Children does today, has evolved under Michigan's Children to work on issues impacting at-risk children and families who are particularly vulnerable, because that is such an important part of what we do today?
Well, that has been our mission. That was our mission when I was at Michigan's Children as well, and I'm glad to see it continuing. We really filled in the gaps for supportive services. For example, there were a lot of education associations and organizations that focused on aspects of the educational system, and we have an educational system. But we have a whole lot of areas that where community services need to better fit with education services, or where child welfare organizations and child welfare services need to interface with education, and there's not the proper connections there. So Michigan's Children really focus there, and it doesn't take long to notice that what you really need to, for advocacy purposes, you really get the biggest bang for the buck when you focus on the children who are most at risk. Those are the children that we really need to turn around their trajectory and to bring them into success. So the children, for example, I mentioned the child welfare system. Children who do not have parents who can take care of them are already by definition at risk, and there are children of various ages in that category. But there are children that are not permanently or formally placed in the child welfare system who are also very much at risk. Some have parents who are unable, who either economically or from mental challenges are not able to really fulfill the role of parents. And parenting is the most difficult job any adult. And that's an adult with upper incomes, adults who are well funded, but certainly adults who have face economic challenges. That being a good parent is a very, very important job, but a very difficult job. And so we worked in a lot of ways to help parents be better parents, to help articulate what parents were facing. As the economic challenges become greater, parents often face having to work several part-time jobs. They have to be, if there is the good fortune to have a two-parent family, often both are out and in the work world. Quite frequently in this society, there are so many families that are a single-parent family, and so the one parent who has to be the breadwinner cannot be 24/7 doing caretaking, or cannot even do the child caretaking that takes place outside of school time. So finding ways to address those issues was huge, and it was one of the big things that Michigan's Children has looked at. But we very early on began to focus on really key developmental stages in children's lives. Early childhood was one of those stages, and we all know that if we do the right things in early childhood, we really help to set a much stronger success for children. But we know that, we've known it for years, but as a society, we still don't invest our money that way. We still are yet to invest in the early kind of services that are really needed. So early childhood development is a very important developmental stage. The other stage that we identified early on in Michigan's Children still follows is adolescence, early adolescence, the transfer from it's sometimes even kids who get the right start in early childhood. It can all be lost if there's not the kind of strengths that need to be there during the development. We began tracking more and more the development of a child's brain, and that tracking really reinforces the two developmental stages that we identified. Early childhood, the development of the young child's brain has been something that I think people are learning more and more of in the past 20 years. But there's also a lot of development that takes place for adolescents. And the adolescent brain development and the adolescent needs are pieces that sometimes are more difficult. I think a lot of people really like to think about little babies and think about early childhood services. A lot of times people are very scared or very have anxieties about dealing with young people, with adolescents, and especially adolescents who may be troubled. So sometimes they want to run away from those problems, those issues, or they want to blame the parents and act like that as long as they blame the parents that there's nothing else they need to do. But we recognize at Michigan's Children that it's important to focus on and work to provide, to guide policymakers in providing the services that are needed. And I'm very pleased with the leadership of Michigan's Children right now. There is great strength and great ability in speaking up for children and in being very vigorous in advocacy for the kinds of services that children need.
Is there something else that you'd like to go back and talk about? We've covered, I guess what I'd like to bring into summation is the impact that Michigan's Children has had in the work that's needed to be done. Certainly there's other groups that have worked on early childhood and at-risk children, but we have such a, I call it a lean, mean fighting machine because it's a small operation, but it has a lot of impact. And it's kind of hard to describe that to people because we don't offer programs. We don't run programs.
It's not a direct service organization.
Yeah, it is about advocacy.
Right.
And I loved how you started talking about, you know, the whole notion behind Kids Speak was that children don't have a voice. But yet here's a way for that voice to be heard because they're our constituents, they can't vote, so we have to work for them. So if you wouldn't mind, Sharon, just kind of bringing it kind of to a close and talking about the impact that Michigan's Children has had now over these years. It's been in business, and you could say it on camera, we've been in business for over 20 years now.
Right.
And there really isn't quite this, we are the only independent voice that covers children of all ages
And cover it, and is multi-issue.
and multi-issue.
It is really important. The impact that Michigan's Children has had is tremendous. Those of us who have worked in that arena recognize it, but it is hard to convey, especially in this bumper sticker society where you're asked or expected to winnow down everything into a 2 or 3 second sound bite. The needs for children are vast and complex, and they interface with one another. And so what Michigan's Children does, as I said, filling in those gaps, is it addresses complex needs, and often those kind of needs require a lot of understanding. Child advocacy is not child's play. It is, because you are focusing on children, it does not mean that what you're doing is easy, that everything you do is summed up by a smiley face. In fact, you are actually dealing with some of the most complex and difficult issues that you can be dealing with. We have made great impact, and I think sometimes the way of talking about the impact of Michigan's Children has to be through the stories we might tell. So I think back to around the year 2000, the 1999, late 1990s or the early 2000s, there was a tremendous amount of concern, as there still is, about the exposure of children to violence and about gun violence. And after the issue in Columbine, the gun issue became really very to the national forefront from Columbine. In Michigan, around that period, there was an episode of a child, a 6-year-old child, who was shot by another 6-year-old child at a school outside of Flint. The issue had to do with the child who was the shooter was in a situation where he had inadequate care. His parent had to was on public assistance and was working, and she left her child with a family member, and that child had an access to a gun through the family member not securing that gun away from the child. The child, who knows, a 6-year-old may have thought he had a toy, takes that gun to school and shoots another 6-year-old kid and kills her. It was devastating. It was a devastating issue. Michigan's Children picked up that issue, and we worked across the aisle. We worked with the then Republican Speaker of the House and with a lot of Democratic legislators to put a package of bills together that it was to address mental health in the schools, to address some issues of gun safety, to address issues of child care, adequate child care for young children. While those bills did not solve the problems, they kind of do give a kind of a blueprint for the kind of effort that needs to be undertaken that's multi-issue, that looks at an issue from, there's never a single, I am using a pun here, never a single bullet. There's never one thing, even with gun issues, even with guns, which are such a big issue. There's not one thing that needs to be done. There's several things that need to be done together, and they need to be done thoughtfully. It's very difficult to fashion thoughtful public policy. I think it's getting more and more difficult as the policy arena changes. The policy environment is more challenging. But that was one of the times that the impact of Michigan's Children led that effort. And then as early childhood services continued to grow, and as the kinds of things that led to the creation of the ECIC, the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, and then spun off into leading to the development of the Office of Great Start, before either of those existed, Michigan's Children was the organization that had the strongest voice on pushing for supports for early childhood, and we were the organization that kind of developed a partnership with private sector organizations, for-profit organizations, to support a multi departmental perspective, a public-private perspective on early childhood, an effort that was called Ready to Succeed that developed into the ECIC and then developed into the Office of Great Start and developed into the early childhood services that we currently have. Michigan's Children was a key in impetus to create that effort. And prior to that, we did not have in government a focus, a unified focus on early childhood. We have been, Michigan's Children has been really a strong voice in that. Michigan's Children's work in youth issues, in graduation rates and cutting down dropout rates in schools has been very strong. There's a plethora of issues. There are health issues. Certainly currently the focus on early on and the focus in the aftermath of the tragedy, the public policy tragedy in Flint, Michigan, that has resulted in lead poisoning to children, which was one of the things Michigan's Children has always worked the hardest to prevent. Michigan's Children's been at the forefront to really developing the early on services and developing the other kinds of early childhood supports and health supports and educational supports that are needed to mitigate the damage of that terrible tragedy in Flint. So I think that the list goes on and on of the kind of areas that Michigan's Children has had an impact. I think under the current leadership of Matt Gillard, there has been tremendous growth and recognition of the importance of Michigan's Children in the policy arena.
Lovely, perfect.
Well, good. And I hope you can legislators listen to Michigan's Children. And I believe number one is the quality of our information. One of the things that was most important about Michigan's Children, and even when I first came there 20 years ago, was the quality of the staff that was already in place. And Michigan's Children has never had a large staff, but they've had a very high quality staff who really are good researchers and believe in providing good, reliable information. Michigan's Children, from our beginnings, began to be seen as a place for reliable information, for information that can be trusted, and impartial information is what we have always striven to be, and I believe we're seen that way. So I think legislators have listened to Michigan's Children over the years because they consider Michigan's Children to be the experts in their area. And Michigan's Children, of course, the handful of staff that's at Michigan's Children cannot know everything about every issue. But what Michigan's Children's staff knows how to do is find answers. They know the people that are focused in every single issue, whether it's health or education or child welfare, and they know how to work collaboratively. So they get information, they get good, strong, solid information from written sources, from the network of people that they know and organizations that they know and trust, and then they boil that information down in ways that legislators can digest. Legislators have a tremendous amount of information that they have to work with, and they have such a broad range, so they really cannot go as deeply into issues as many of us might like. So we need to be able to boil it down in ways that they can focus on it. Matt, as a leader of Michigan's Children, knows the legislative environment extremely well and has participated in it himself. He knows how policy is made, but he also communicates very, very well. And to be able to boil down your message, to be able to know who the opinion leaders are, who the people in the legislature who can shape your message and carry your message, to who to partner with. Michigan's Children has the know-how of the policy-making process, as well as the knowledge and as being a source of reliable information. And that combination has worked for the organization for well over 20 years, going on 25 years, and I hope to see Michigan's Children last for another 20 years, and I hope to see its current director take the record from me of being the longest serving president of Michigan's Children.
Perfect. Beautiful, that was great.